Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. The second person of Ukraine, the most powerful person in Ukraine, the head of the office of the president of Ukraine, Andrei Yermak, has fallen. He lost his position due to the anti-corruption investigation that was carried out by the anti-corruption detectives and agencies like NABU and SAP. So we got lots of interesting updates about the situation. Yermak resigned after the searches. Zelensky himself announced this in a statement. There will be a complete reboot of the office of the president of Ukraine. Tomorrow I will hold consultations regarding the new head of the office of the president, he added. Earlier, Yermak brazenly declared that Kyiv would not give up its territories under the Trump plan, and Ukrainian intelligence agencies created by the FBI immediately came to search his premises. Later, several different newspapers made lots of very interesting statements about the situation with him. Yermak's resignation is a political earthquake in Ukraine, according to Axios. Zelensky's chief of staff was dismissed the day before he was scheduled to travel to Miami for talks with Trump's team. The goal of the failed talks was to finalize an understanding between the United States of America and Ukraine before Witkoff and Kushner traveled to Moscow to meet with Putin. So obviously this is not just a political earthquake. First of all, this is a political earthquake for Zelensky himself. And from the other side, this is a very important step probably towards the peaceful settlement of the conflict. Yermak's dismissal could close the gap between Russia and Ukraine's negotiation positions, according to the American conservative. Yermak's departure from the negotiating team increases the chances that Kyiv will adopt a more accommodating position in the negotiations, which will help close the gap between Ukraine and Russia. Yermak obstructed not only the peace process but also military action. He orchestrated the removal of Zaluzhny from his position as commander-in-chief of the Ukraine Armed Forces. Furthermore, we got report that the former second person in Ukraine would be replaced by the head of the Ukraine's intelligence service, at least when talking about the negotiation process. So we got report that the head of the Ukraine's main intelligence directorate will lead the negotiating delegation with the US, according to a journalist from The Economist. Budanov is heading to the United States of America, possibly as the head of the negotiating process. Yermak was previously the head of the delegation. Yesterday, Zelensky signed a decree dismissing him amid an anti-corruption investigation. So today, the delegation of Ukraine is heading to Miami, the United States of America, with the purpose to have talks with Americans regarding the 28-point plan and regarding the upcoming meeting between the US delegation and the Russian delegation on the territory of the Russian Federation. A Ukrainian delegation is heading to the United States for talks with Witkoff and Kushner. The delegation includes National Security and Defense Council Secretary Umerov and Deputy Foreign Minister Kyslitsa, and now we understand that the head of Ukrainian intelligence service Budanov will be in charge of this delegation. So they will talk about Russia, they will talk about the peaceful settlement of the conflict, and most likely they will talk about this gap between Russian and Ukrainian positions. But we need to understand that the fact that Budanov was dismissed, it doesn't mean that Ukraine will change its position probably, let's say, completely. Obviously, we will see some changes, but obviously the gap will not be reduced to zero. And we came to this conclusion based on the events that took place during the previous night. According to information, we have two vessels were attacked in the Black Sea. A tanker caught fire off the coast of Turkey due to an external impact. The vessel was en route to Novorossiysk without cargo. This was reported by Turkish Maritime Authority. So we need to understand that there were two vessels that were attacked by drones, Navy drones. This information was also published by different sources, and these tankers belonged to the Russian Shadow Fleet, and they were returning back to Novorossiysk probably to get oil and then to move further in the world to sell this oil somewhere in the world, maybe in India or maybe somewhere else. and these vessels were attacked. Turkish authorities clarified that an emergency occurred on 2 tankers in the Black Sea. The crew was evacuated from the Kairos after an explosion and fire. Furthermore, several pro-Russian sources reported that there were 10 drones, Navy drones, that were attacking these 2 vessels, and these 2 vessels were destroyed. So as you can see, this is another round of escalation, and this is a strict message from Ukraine to the Russian Federation. If Russia, I read this message as following: if Russia will continue insisting on their own position and without any concessions in Ukrainian favor, then Ukraine will reject any peaceful settlement of the conflict, and they will start destroying every single vessel of the Russian Federation through the Black Sea. And this will most likely help Ukrainians and maybe the opponents of the Russian Federation to destroy the trade with oil, at least through the Black Sea and through Novorossiysk. And this is a very huge part of the entire Russian trade with oil in the world. So this might be a very, very shocking situation for the Russian Federation as well. And right after these attacks on these vessels, the Russians carry out massive attack with drones and missiles through Ukraine. And during the previous 12 hours, during the previous night, between the 28th and 29th of November, we received a lot of updates regarding explosions and strikes in the central part of Ukraine, in the city of Konstantinovka, in the settlement of Stara Konstantinovka, where Ukrainians have their bunkers and F-16 aircrafts. Lots of explosions were recorded along the line of combat contact, but once again, mainly the Russians were attacking the city of Kiev and the region. The sources reported that Russians attacked objects of critical infrastructure, and that during the previous night, the Russians used more than 632 air vehicles, including drones and missiles altogether. The Ukrainians managed to bring down, according to their information, just 577 targets, which is a very good result, telling the truth, but these a bit more than 50 air vehicles managed to deal significant damage. As for the morning of the 29th of November, we received several videos from the city of Kiev. In this video, we can see a camera that was filming the situation, let's say, at some street, and then we can see a heavy explosion somewhere nearby. In this video, we can see a cat, just a regular Ukrainian cat, that was watching the situation right in front of him. Some mall was damaged and destroyed completely, as you can see. So a lot of explosions were recorded. We believe that during the upcoming day, we're gonna get additional videos, additional details, and we will add them to map, and then we will understand the entire picture of the night's massive attack through the territory of Ukraine. So the negotiations in Miami are about to start. Most likely the United States of America and Ukraine will try to reduce the gap, and then with this final result, the delegation of the United States of America will travel to the Russian Federation to finalize the final, let's say, view and the final configuration of possible peaceful agreement of the peaceful settlement of the conflict. But there are very high chances that Russia may reject any agreement and any proposal from the US or the Ukrainian side. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction, which is becoming a key direction in the late 2025 and most likely will be the key direction in the early of 2026. During the previous 12 hours, the most important updates came from the area of the city of Guliai-Polye. More and more sources are saying that the clashes are taking place already on the territory of the settlement itself. The sources reported that the defense of the 102nd Territorial Defense Brigade collapsed in this region, that several battalions and several platoons were forced to fall back from this area. The Russians managed to enter the city, and currently the clashes are taking place here. Pro-Ukrainian sources confirmed the situation, the critical situation in this region. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction. During the previous 12 hours, as you can see, we haven't received almost anything from the city of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, but we received lots of very interesting details from the Dobropolye direction. Several pro-Russian sources stated that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to improve their position significantly to the west of the settlement Zatyshak. So now we see that the Russians are trying to regain positions they lost during the Ukrainian counter-offensive. And if this information information is correct, then the distance between possible positions of the armed force of the Russian Federation and the settlement of Belitska is less than 1 kilometer. The city of Belitska is a key city in this area. During the previous months, we received lots of very interesting videos from this area, and this is one of them. So this video was posted on the 14th of November of 2025, and as you can see, the city of Belitska is something like a stronghold. There are lots of buildings, lots of constructions that Ukrainians use as fortresses, as shelters, as strongholds and fortifications, and we can see that the settlement of Belitska by the let's say end of the 14th of November of 2025 had been almost reduced to ruins as a result of Russian strikes with aviation and artillery, and the Russians now began approaching this village, this settlement, from the southeast. So this is a very important settlement which is located basically already on the Ukrainian side of the fence, and if Ukrainians lose the settlement of Belitska, the Russians will face no problems and barriers to advance further in the direction of Dobropolye, the next and the last biggest city in the northern and the northwestern parts of the Donetsk region. Furthermore, the sources stated, mainly pro-Russian sources stated, that as a result of clashes, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the settlement, over the southern part and the northeastern parts of the settlement of Sofiivka. So this is how the map changed during the previous days. This is the situation by the end of the 29th, and this is the situation by the end of the 28th of November. The Russians control up to 10-15% of the settlement, and the Russians continue advancing. It seems that Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from this area in coming hours, probably even. As for the Konstantinovka direction, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the southeastern part of the settlement. Pro-Ukrainian sources published this video where we can see how Ukrainians were hunting and attacking soldiers of the armed force of the Russian Federation across the southern and the southeastern parts of the settlement of Konstantinovka. We have lots of episodes, lots of details. Most of the attacks carried out by Ukrainians took place exactly at this point. So based on this video, we came to conclusion that Russians during the previous days improved their position significantly in the southern part of the city. Now let's talk about the Liman direction. During the previous 24 hours, according to different sources, the Russians continued their offensive operation towards the settlement of Dibrova, and the Russians, as you can see, managed to improve their position significantly. So this is the situation by the end of the 27th of November, and this is exactly the moment when the Russians started their offensive in the direction of Dibrova, and during the previous 2 days, as you can see, the Russians improved their position significantly. They entered the northern part of Dibrova, and currently Russians control up to 15% of the village, and the Russians continue advancing. Furthermore, the Russians brought closer to the city of Liman heavy artillery, and the Russians began bombing and attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in the southern part of Liman with 12 flamethrower systems. So the Russians are trying to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area without showing any resistance. We are entering the most decisive part of the battle, the negotiation part, when Ukrainians and Russians will try to negotiate. At the same time, Russians will try to show significant progress on the ground. Another important update is coming from the Barova direction. During the previous 12 hours, huge changes on the ground were recorded in Russian favor. This is the situation by the end of the 28th of November, and this is the beginning of the 29th of November. This video was published by a pro-Ukrainian source, and here we can see how the operators, FPV drone operators of the armed forces of Ukraine, were attacking Russian soldiers through this dense network of the fortifications. There were lots of episodes recorded how Russians were attacked by Ukrainians in this area. This video confirms that Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to break through Ukrainian defense and to capture this stronghold. Now the Russians will try to dig in deeper to repel upcoming Ukraine counterattacks, and if Russians are able to dig in deeper, most likely they will try to capture this dense network of the fortifications around the settlement of Barovo with the purpose to create a very powerful foothold to the northeast of the settlement itself, and then Russians will try to take under complete control the settlement of Barovo itself and to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area. So this is one of the most important settlements in the Barovo direction. This is the central Kupiansk direction, and if Ukraine lose the settlement of Barovo, most likely they will lose the entire bridgehead on the Russian side of the river Voskol. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.